Hello everyone, my name is Rob, welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video I'll be giving you my Challenge Cup 6th round predictions. There's going to be a few interesting games in here, a few duplicate games from last week in Super League, but there's going to be a lot of high scoring games, I'd imagine. But let's get into the first game of the 6th round. Kicking things off in the 6th round of the Challenge Cup, we have Leeds Rhinos versus St Helens, one of the duplicate games from Super League in round 5. This will be a really interesting game. I see it kind of going somewhat similarly to the last game that they played. I think Saints will have a little bit more control over this game than they did last time, especially in that first half. I think Leeds will absolutely challenge. They could take a lead into the first half. They could keep it close, take a lead at some point in the game. But I think Saints will just have a lot more control. I don't think anyone's going to be resting players this week. Why would they? Unless they both agreed to play with academy players, which they're definitely not going to be doing. Both teams at full force, and on a typical day, given where I've got these teams in my power rankings for Super League, I'm going to lean towards St Helens. So I see it going fairly similar to the league game, but Saints with a bit more control. So I'm going to go with Leeds Rhinos 12, St Helens 24. Next up we have the Wigan Warriors versus Sheffield Eagles. This could be a bit of a bloodbath. The biggest positive for Sheffield in this game is that Wigan's going to be resting a lot of players. I assume they'll be resting a lot of players. Possibly even more than they did against the Broncos. There'll be no Harry Smith, no Bevan French, maybe Field. They might choose to drop Field. I don't know. I don't think any squads have been announced yet. If they have, I apologise. But as of time of recording, I've not seen any squads. So I think Wigan would still keep one of those three. And I think if they were to keep anyone, I've got a feeling it would be Harry Smith. I don't know why, it's just a gut feeling. Maybe just to have a bit more control in that team. Because if they're going to use a lot of academy players, they need someone that's going to basically set the tone of the entire game, and Harry Smith would do that. And then you at least save the athletic and energetic French and Field. I think that makes the most sense to me, and I've just a gut feeling that they'll keep Smith in there. But they might still use a lot of their key players, and even with their academy players, they're a significantly stronger team. The Eagles, compared to the Broncos, because this is going to be like the closest comparison I can get, compared to the Broncos, won't be nearly as strong, as the Broncos have made, have additions to their team that are somewhat Super League quality, and the Eagles just won't be anywhere near that. So I think even with Wigan resting a lot of players, there's an absolute massacre to be had here. So I'm going to go with Wigan Warriors 64, Sheffield Eagles 8. Next up we have Kingston Rovers versus Salford Red Devils. This is going to be an extremely entertaining game, I feel, given that they only played a couple of weeks ago. Salford came out on top with the win, and for me right now, the better form team is Salford, quite clearly. They've had the much tougher start to Super League. Kingston Rovers have still played some fairly tough games, but they've not been challenged like Salford has, and Salford is still coming out looking better. I think the worst performance from Salford so far this season is probably from the Castleford game, just based on expectations alone. They should have been a lot more comfortable in that game. They were for a lot of it, but then let them creep back in. But they were strong against Leeds. They were okay against Saints, out of it for a lot until the red card helped them to come back in, build pressure and momentum. Firmly in it against Wigan, should have won that game and just choked it, unfortunately. But they've looked pretty good. They've had some really tough games. Hull KR haven't been challenged as much and have looked more shaky. So based on how competent I think one team looks compared to the other, I'm also feeling like there's going to be a random drop goal in here somewhere. So I'm going to go with Kingston Rovers 10, Salford Red Devils 17. Next up we have Huddersfield Giants versus Hull FC. This is quite an interesting one for me because, okay, I am leaning towards the Giants. I do think they should win this one here, and comfortably. But there's also that element of inconsistency. And I just feel like this is one of those games where some random elite performance from Hull FC is just about to pop up from absolutely nowhere. Now, My prediction will say otherwise, but I just have this feeling that it's going to happen. So I am leaning firmly towards Huddersfield. I think they should have a fairly strong win here. Both teams should be around full capacity in terms of personnel. No one's going to be resting anyone. Hull FC are going to be absolutely up for this. I know they won't be resting anyone because, I don't think the club and the coaches would accept not even trying for a trophy unless they think, we just won't bother. We'll save everyone, focus purely on the Super League. Huddersfield, I just don't think they'd drop anyone anyway, just because they're so inconsistent. They need as much game time as they can get, really. So, but looking at these teams on paper, based on the performances so far this season, it's overwhelmingly Huddersfield for me. So, with that being said, I'm going to go with Huddersfield Giants 28, Hull FC 12. Next up, we have Leigh Leopards versus Featherstone Rovers. This is another one that could be a bit of a bloodbath. Featherstone might not be quite as strong in the hierarchy of the Championship as they were last season, but could still be incredibly strong. Things are going to be a bit different with Darryl Powell in there. I think he is a better coach than Sean Long. Can he get more out of that team than Sean Long did? We'll have to see. I think there's only been one round in the Championship so far. So they are going to struggle against a Leigh team that completely demolished a Super League team in Hull FC without Lachlan Lamb and Edwin Aparpe. And I think this is going to be a massacre, mainly because, as far as I'm aware, Leigh don't have the depth to replace anyone else. So I don't really see them resting people for this game. So we'll have McNamara coming in. He'll get some more minutes. Matt Moylan has another opportunity to kind of, stretch his legs a bit, get a bit of a run around. We might get a chance to see that huge gulf in quality between NRL starter and Championship. So it could be the Matt Moylan show. We will see. But Leigh, given the fact that they're coming up against a much weaker side, they don't have the ability to really drop play or rest players, and they dealt extremely well with key players out against a Super League level team. It's going to be another massacre. So I'm going to go with Leigh Leopards 50, Featherstone Rovers 4. Next up, we have the Batley Bulldogs versus Castleford Tigers. I think this might be a great opportunity for the Tigers to get a bit of confidence back. Granted, it's only against Batley, but any win will instill some kind of confidence. And also, the same thing I said about Hull, I don't think the club or coaches would accept not trying for a trophy given how poor the season's going in Super League. So they'll be putting their full team or close to a full team out, I feel. They may have a few academy players in there, maybe. At least on the bench anyway, but typically I think they'll have their usual starting 13. Batley, I think, are probably, a middle-of-the-pack Championship team that could probably put up some points against a really off Castleford team this season. So I do think maybe 2 tries on the cards for Batley in this game. But Castleford ultimately should be the much stronger team. They should be. And if it's a real struggle, I will only accept it being a real struggle if there's a bunch of academy players playing for Castleford. But if it's a real struggle with their usual team, they are completely in the mud along with Hull FC. But I'm going to go with Batley Bulldogs 10, Castleford Tigers 32. Next up, we have Warrington Wolves versus London Broncos, another duplicate match from last week in Super League. I think London will be better prepared this week. So I'm expecting a slightly smaller gap in terms of the points difference. Warrington, I'm not sure who they're going to have back this week because they were without Danny Walker, George Williams and Lachlan Fitzgibbon. Fitzgibbon is still away, I'm pretty sure. Williams, I think, is a question mark, and Danny Walker, I'm not too sure. I actually don't know the situation with him. But I think Warrington have had to throw up a few pairings so far in the halves, and they've dealt with them fairly well. So they've not had that consistency. They've been all over the place, and still come out on top. Similar to what the Catalans Dragons were like last season. They had like a new spine every single week, and they were looking really strong. And it's the same for Warrington Wolves this season. Now, they haven't really been fully tested yet, and the London Broncos absolutely have. They've played all of the top 4 teams in Super League, or have at some point that have been in the top 4. So that's Saints, Wigan, Catalans, and Warrington Wolves. You'd kind of hope that at some point they start closing the gap to like the top 4 teams. They'll certainly look strong against the few bottom teams like Castleford, Hull FC, for example. But I think there's still going to be a huge gap in this game. Warrington have been dealing really well with the players that they've had to be without. Players have come in and dealt with it really well. Their depth looks great. I don't get the feeling they're going to drop many players. There may be one or two. The only one that I could see happening is Thulis will get rested for Aaron Lindup, simply because Thulis gets a head knock basically every single week of his life. So that's one change I could definitely see happening, but I don't think Sam Burgess would drop that many players. I think more kids would get an opportunity. Maybe Max Wood might start, for example, and maybe just more minutes for some of the younger guys. Tom Whitehead as well. Is it Tom Whitehead? I think it is. But yeah, just a few more minutes for the kids. But yeah, should be a huge gap still. And Matt Duffy is playing out of his skin at the moment. So I'm going to go with Warrington Wolves 48, London Broncos 6. Finally, for this round of the Challenge Cup, we have Halifax Panthers versus Catalans Dragons. Another game which should be pretty clear-cut. The Dragons won't be resting many players. I think they'll be fairly close to full force. And also, one of the reasons for that would be that I think they're still in a transition period, and they want to get as many minutes as possible with their spine. So Artur Morg, Jordan Abdul, Theo Farge. So they're still learning. They've gone down in my power rankings this last week. So I think they want to get as many minutes in as possible. It'll be a lot easier to throw the ball around, and I think Theo Farge could really rip them up if he's playing. But sometimes you need to play an easier opponent to know what your plans should look like. You do it in training, but in a game situation, Halifax will throw some different things out there. They'll go over footage and try and really, go at Catalans. But yeah, I think they'll be in full force. They've looked a little bit sluggish, but in attack against this caliber of opponent, they should look a lot cleaner. So yeah, another potential massacre, but I'm going to go with Halifax Panthers 6, Catalans Dragons 46. So that's going to be it for this Challenge Cup 6th round predictions video. If you have your own predictions, do let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to stay up to date with new Rugby League content. If you want to see a potential upcoming bet this weekend, you can follow the TikTok in the description down below. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.